The logout button disappeared first, not the sky, not the monsters, not the ground under Edenfall's starter plaza. The small blue logout button in the corner of every player's menu simply blinked once, turned gray, and vanished. For half a second, nobody understood what had happened. Then the plaza exploded. Players slammed their palms through empty menu windows. Mages shouted for customer support. Swordsmen drew starter blades as if a weapon could cut open the system interface. A child-sized tamer grabbed the collar of his wolf pup and screamed for someone outside the capsule to wake him up. Above all of us, a red system warning opened across the sky. Full soul sync active. Emergency disconnect disabled. Avatar death equals real body termination. If HP reaches 0, the connected body outside the capsule will fail. That was when the panic became real. I stood in the middle of Edenfall's starter plaza with my hands locked around a menu that no longer contained a way out. My name panel read Hikari Haru. My starting clothes were plain. Dark tunic, simple pants, cheap boots, no armor worth naming. Around me, hundreds of players stared upward at the same red warning. A man with a sword tag shouted, "This is a launch event, right?" Nobody answered because the system answered first. Survival class synchronization beginning. Class tags will display publicly for the first synchronization window. The air above every player flickered. Blue, red, silver, green, and gold tags appeared one after another. Swordsman, Flame Mage, Shield Knight, Archer, Healer. Berserker, Scout, Tamer, Rune Duelist, Storm Fencer. Even the weaker tags looked useful now. Even a basic farmer had a tool icon and a stamina bonus. Even a cook had fire resistance. Every visible person had something that made sense in a death game. Then my tag appeared, gray, flat, dull. Training dummy. The nearest flame mage stared at it, blinked twice, and started laughing. A few players turned, then a few more. Someone said, training dummy. Another player said, that is not even a class, that is furniture. I opened my status panel before the crowd could decide whether I was funny or doomed. Attack damage 0, weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Damage contribution permanently 0. The words did not feel real at first. I tapped the panel twice, like the number might update if I caught the system off guard. It did not. Attack damage 0. Weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Damage contribution permanently 0. A beginner with a spear walked up wearing a bronze tag that read Lancer Trainee. He looked scared. Everyone looked scared, but fear makes some people quiet and makes others cruel. He pointed the spear at my chest and smirked. The beginner said, so if we need bait, we just throw him first. I stepped back. The spear tip tapped my shoulder. Not a stab, not a real attack. A mocking poke with enough force to make my HP bar twitch. 1 point of damage. The crowd laughed again. Then a black hidden window opened in front of me. Perfect target activated. Hostile hit survived. Counter damage increased by 1. Reflection radius increased by 1 centimeter. I stopped breathing. The beginner did not see the hidden window. None of them did. They saw only the same pathetic gray tag, the same 0 attack. The same player who could not equip a weapon. But I saw the second line, permanent stack recorded. Before I could read more, a larger player stepped forward with a real axe tag glowing over his head. Berserker, he grinned like the first beginner had given him permission. The hidden log flashed red. Fatal hit warning. Only hostile hits survived by the training dummy are recorded. Fatal hits record nothing. I moved before the axe came down. The blade slammed into the plaza stones where I had been standing and left a bright system crack in the ground. No stack, no counter, no second chance. The laughter faded because even the crowd understood the difference between a joke and a real death game hit. I ran. Not far, not blindly. I ran toward the only place a 0 damage player could survive long enough to understand his own class, the rabbit field outside the starter gate. Behind me, the red full soul sync warning stayed in the sky. Above my head, the gray training dummy tag followed me like a curse. Inside my hidden log, one line kept glowing. Hostile hit survived. Permanent stack recorded. The plaza did not calm down after the first joke. It became louder because class tags kept appearing over people's heads, and every new tag created a new ranking in the crowd's mind. A tall player with a red Berserker tag shoved through the panic. Because people made room for him. A girl with a healer tag had strangers begging her to join parties before she even knew what her first skill did. A shield knight was immediately pulled toward the front of the plaza by players who wanted someone between them and the gate. That was how fast society rebuilt itself when death became real. Useful tags became walls. Useless tags became gaps. My gray tag sat above me like a hole in the formation. A flame mage pointed at me and said, "The system gave him to us as a practice object." A scout beside him frowned. "Do not say that." "Why not? The class literally says training dummy." The scout did not answer because the scout did not have a better argument yet. That silence mattered. People were not monsters. Not all of them, but fear had turned every useful class into a resource, and every resource needed somewhere to stand. If the system had labeled me as the safest thing to abandon, some people were willing to believe it before they understood what they were doing. The Lancer trainee who poked me looked relieved when the crowd laughed. His hand had been shaking before. After the laugh, it steadied. He had found someone lower than himself. That was why the first hostile hit counted. It was not an accident. It was not a stumble. It was fear trying to become cruel cruelty before anyone could call it by name. The hidden perfect target log remained open after the poke. I scrolled with my eyes, too afraid to move my hands. Class training dummy, passive perfect target, condition survive hostile hit. Reward counter damage +1. Reward, reflection radius +1 centimeter. Direct damage permissions, none. Weapon permissions, none. Active attack skill permissions, none. Damage contribution, 0. A second panel unfolded under it. Warning. Training dummy records only survived hostile hits. Fatal hits cannot be recorded. Non-hostile contact cannot be recorded. Environmental harm cannot be recorded without ownership confirmation. Poison does not automatically record. The wording was not long, but each line was heavy. The system was not giving me power. It was giving me a way to become useful only if I lived through people trying to hurt me. The Berserker's axe made the decision simple. The crowd had not yet seen the fatal hit warning. They saw me duck, saw the axe crack the plaza stone, and finally understood I had not been dodging humiliation. I had been dodging death. A red damage preview flickered where the axe had struck. Estimated impact, lethal, no stack gained. The Berserker's grin faded. For 1 second, the plaza saw the truth. The training dummy was not invincible. He was not secretly overpowered yet. He was a player with 1 recorded point of counter damage, a 1 centimeter radius, and no way to attack back. That was why I ran to the rabbit field. Not because I was brave, because the rabbits were the only enemies weak enough to let me learn the rules without dying from the lesson. The first minute also created a rule for the audience. Every important fact had to be visible. The missing logout button was visible. The red full soul sync warning was visible. The class tags were visible. My gray training dummy tag was visible. My 0 attack panel was visible. That was why the crowd reacted so strongly. They were not guessing I was weak. The system displayed my weakness above my head and in my status window. It made humiliation part of the interface. The same rule would define the whole story. If a hit counted, the log would show it. If a hit failed, the log would reject it. If poison bypassed me, the HP bar would prove it. If I won, the damage log would still read 0. That clarity was the only reason anyone could trust a power this strange. In a death game, vague miracles are scary. Clear rules are still scary, but they can be used. So when I ran from the plaza, I was not running from the story. I was running toward the first test the viewer could understand. The rabbit field should have been embarrassing. In a normal game, a player with any combat class could clear it half asleep. The rabbits were small, gray, and round, with little red hostile markers that blinked only when someone got too close. Their attacks were pathetic. 1 bite, 2 damage at most. Maybe 3 if they jumped. Perfect. I stopped at the edge of the field and checked my panel again. HP 100, attack damage 0. Counter damage 1, reflection radius 1 centimeter. A single centimeter, that was not power. That was a joke with a measuring unit. But it was permanent. A rabbit lunged at my boot and bit my ankle. HP dropped from 100 to 98. The hidden log opened. Hostile hit survived. Counter damage increased by 1. Reflection radius increased by 1 centimeter. I stared at the rabbit. The rabbit stared back, deeply committed to being my enemy. It bit me again. HP 96. Counter damage 3. Reflection radius 3 centimeters. My heart started pounding for a completely different reason. This was not free. The HP loss was real. If enough rabbits surrounded me, they could still kill me. If I let a stronger monster hit me, the warning was clear. A fatal strike would end everything and record nothing. But weak hostile hits worked. I backed away, waited for my natural recovery to tick once, and let the rabbit bite again. At first, nobody noticed. The field was too chaotic. Players were still trying to understand the death game rules. Swordsmen cut rabbits apart. Mages fired little flames. Archers missed easy shots because their hands shook. Healers were already being begged for help by anyone who had taken a claw swipe. Then a girl in a white and pale green healer coat noticed me. Her tag read Light Stitcher, Amero Rina. She watched me let the same rabbit bite my ankle 3 times. Amero Rina said, "Are you trying to die slowly?" I looked up. No, that is not what it looks like. I opened my public panel to the part everyone could see. Attack damage 0, weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Amero Rina's expression changed. The joke left her face. Healers notice numbers differently from attackers. They see how close a bad decision is to a permanent one. Amero Rina said, "Your HP is at 81. I know, you keep saying that like it helps. I need small hostile hits." She stared at me for 1 second too long. Then she did something that saved my life before either of us understood the size of it. She lifted her hand and green-white threads wrapped around my ankle. Amero Rina said, "I can stitch you in small amounts. Not full heals, small taps. If you are doing something stupid, at least do it with math." A heal number floated up. HP +6. Not enough to make me safe forever. Enough to keep testing. A rabbit bit me again. Counter damage 4. Reflection radius 4 centimeters. Amero Rina's eyes narrowed. Something changed. You saw that. Not the window, but your tag glowed. That mattered. The hidden log was private, but the class tag reacted. A faint blue-gray pulse passed through the dull training dummy icon each time a stack recorded. A nearby archer saw the pulse too. Her tag read Scout Archer, Toki Mei. She had short dark hair, sharp eyes, and the expression expression of someone who distrusted anything that did not fit neatly into a line. Tokime said, "Wait, was that from the rabbit?" I did not answer fast enough. She drew an arrow and fired at the ground beside me. The arrow nicked my sleeve. The hidden log stayed dark. Rejected, accidental or non-hostile contact does not record. Tokime saw my face and understood that something had failed. She frowned, so contact is not enough. The archer beside her laughed and said, "Then maybe you need to mean it." Tokime did not laugh, but she looked at me, then at the rabbit, then at the thin blue-gray pulse still fading from my tag. "Do not move," she said. This time she aimed at my shoulder. She did not fire to miss. The arrow hit shallowly, registered 1 point of damage, and dissolved under beginner dual protection before it could do anything worse. The hidden log opened. Hostile hit survived. Counter damage increased by 1. Reflection radius increased by 1 centimeter. Tokime lowered her bow. That counted. Amero Rina snapped. "Do not shoot him again without asking." Tokime looked at me. "Did you ask the rabbit?" "The rabbit is hostile by default. That is convenient." "No," I said, watching my HP dip below 60. "It is survivable." The difference mattered. Over the next few minutes, the three of us built the first real rule set. Rabbits counted if they attacked. Accidental arrows did not. A hostile arrow did. A shove from a panic player did not. A shove from someone trying to hurt me did. Poisoned grass near the field lowered HP without adding anything. A falling fence post did not count. Every rule came with a cost. Every test used my HP as paper. By the time my counter damage reached 50, the blue-gray ring around my boots was wide enough to see when the light hit it. Amero Rina stopped healing and grabbed my sleeve. "That is enough." I looked at the rabbit in front of me. It lunged again. This time it never reached my ankle. The rabbit hit the edge of the faint ring, recoiled, and collapsed into light. The public combat log opened above it. Rabbit defeated. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. The players around us went silent. Tokime stared at the log. Amero Rina stared at me. I stared at the number 0. For the first time since the logout button disappeared, the gray tag above my head did not look like a curse. It looked like a loaded trap. Amero Rina did not join me because she believed in me. She joined because my HP bar was making her angry. That was her first useful trait. She did not heal because someone looked heroic. She healed because a number was falling in front of her and she could stop it from reaching 0. In a death game, that kind of practicality was better than kindness with no timing. She made rules immediately. Amero Rina said, "You do not take 3 bites in a row without calling your HP." I said, "It slows the stacking. It keeps your real body alive." That ended the argument, so we started counting aloud. Rabbit bite, HP 98, light stitch pulse. HP 100, rabbit bite, HP 98. Rabbit bite, HP 96, pause, recover. Repeat. The field around us changed while we worked. At first, people killed rabbits without thinking. Then they watched me and started asking questions. One swordsman wondered whether the rabbits could be made to attack in rotation. A cook with a fire resistance tag offered to lure them closer because she had more stamina than attack. A tamer sent his wolf pup to bark at rabbits, then panicked when 3 rabbits chased the pup back toward us. That almost ruined the test. The pup was not hostile to me. The rabbits were. The tamer was not trying to hurt me. The rabbits were. When the pup crashed into my leg, nothing happened. When a rabbit leapt around it and bit me, the stack recorded. Tokime crouched beside the track marks in the grass. Tokime said, "The system is separating movement from intent." Amero Rina said, "Useful. Dangerous," Toki said. "If someone pushes a monster into him without meaning harm, it might not count until the monster itself attacks." I looked at the rabbit still chewing on my boot. "That is enough for rabbits. It will not be enough for smarter enemies," Toki said. That was the reason she stayed, not friendship, not admiration. She saw a rule that could kill people if misunderstood, and her class was built around seeing lines before they became wounds. We tested one more thing before the first payoff. A panicked player tripped and slammed into me while running from a rabbit pack. No stack. A second player, angry that I was attracting attention, shoved me with both hands and said, "Move, dummy." The hidden log opened. Hostile contact survived. Counter damage increased. Reflection radius increased. Amero Rina glared at him so hard he backed away. Toki marked the shove location with her boot. "Hostility can be social," she said, "not just weapon-based." That line would matter later when guilds tried contracts. At the time, it only told me one thing. I could not farm by letting the world bump into me. I had to survive harm that had chosen me. By the time the first rabbit collapsed, the radius around my boots was not impressive. It was barely wider than a dinner plate. But it was visible, and in a death game, visible proof travels farther than any explanation. The nearest swordsman stopped swinging. A healer covered her mouth. The Lancer trainee from the plaza stood near the gate, staring as if the rabbit had died from embarrassment. Tokime whispered again. Another rabbit lunged. It hit the ring and dissolved into light. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. the second log made the field stop. One rabbit could be a bug, two rabbits became a pattern. Amero Rina looked at my HP bar, then at the ring, then at the crowd forming around us. Amero Rina said, if people start testing this, we control the line or you die. She was right, power had appeared, now people would try to touch it. News travels fast in a trapped game. Bad news travels faster. By the time the first rabbit collapsed against my reflection radius, half the beginner field had already decided I was either cheating, bug, or secretly using a hidden item. The other half had decided they did not care as long as I stood between them and the rabbits. That was how the practice lane started, not as a plan, as desperation. A swordsman with shaking hands walked up and said, if I hit you lightly, it helps you. Amero Rina answered before I did. If he survives it. The swordsman swallowed, and if he does not, then we all find out whether the system was lying about real bodies. He almost left, then a rabbit pack spawned behind him and fear pushed him forward. He tapped my shoulder with the flat of his beginner blade. HP -1, hidden log recorded. Counter damage increased, reflection radius increased. The swordsman stepped back wide-eyed. That worked, I nodded. Again, but weak. A second player came, then a third. Not everyone, some still laughed, some refused to touch me. Some wanted to hit harder just to see what would happen. And Genbu Ryo stopped the first of those before I even knew his name. He was a broad shield knight with a polished starter shield and a suspicious glare. His tag was a clean silver blue. Genbu Ryo stepped between me and an overeager berserker. Genbu Ryo said, he said weak. The berserker sneered. Why are you protecting the dummy? Genbu Ryo raised his shield. Because a death game is a bad place to waste useful weirdness. That was the beginning of my first shield lane. Genbu Ryo did not trust me, not yet. He did not understand the mechanic. He did not like that a zero-damage player could make monsters collapse, while a shield knight still had to block with his body. But he understood formation, he understood risk. He understood that if weak hits charged my radius and strong hits could kill me. Someone needed to control the line. Amero Rina controlled my HP. Tokime controlled the test shots. Genbu Ryo controlled the crowd. I stood in the middle and took hits. Every few minutes the ring widened. 1 centimeter became 10. 10 became 30. 30 became a visible circle around my boots. Players started marking the dirt with sticks. Someone dragged a broken practice post beside me and scratched the radius line into the wood. That post became the first dummy stake. It was stupid looking, it was also useful. The stake let Genbu Ryo keep people from stepping too close. It let Tokime mark where accidental contact stopped and real hostile lines started. It let Amero Rina measure how far she could stand while keeping. Light stitch attached to my HP. The practice lane became a machine. Weak hit. Heal, weak hit, pause, rabbit collision, 0 damage log. Repeat, the danger never left. Twice I had to step out because my HP dropped too low. Once a panic player swung too hard, and Genbu Ryo blocked the blow before it reached me. Once a poison rabbit variant spawned, and I had to retreat because the bite carried a green debuff. That did not feed the counter, each failure taught the crowd something. The counter was real, the counter had limits. I was not invincible, that last lesson mattered most. Because when the Iron Hide Boar King spawned, nobody asked why I did not simply stand there smiling. They saw my face, they saw the boss bar. They saw me start calculating. The first practice lane was terrible. That was what made it believable. Nobody had matching gear. Nobody had a plan that sounded noble. One player drew a line in the dirt with a broken rabbit fence. Another dragged over the practice post. A farmer used a hoe to scratch centimeter marks into the ground because he had a tool and finally wanted to be useful. A tamer held his wolf pup by the collar so it would not run straight into the line. Genbu Ryo took one look at the mess and started giving orders. Not because anyone elected him, because he was the first person with a shield who understood that a bad line could kill everyone near it. Genbu Ryo said weak hits only, no overhead swings, no charge skills, no axes. If you cannot control your hand, you do not get near him. The berserker from the plaza tried to laugh. Genbu raised his shield, the laugh stopped. That mattered too. Genbu did not need to beat the berserker. He only needed to show the crowd there would be consequences before reckless curiosity became lethal. Amero Rina created the second rule. No hit below 70 HP unless I say so. Tokime created the third. No test counts unless we know intent. I created the fourth. If I say stop, everyone stops. The system accepted none of those rules as official. The crowd accepted them anyway because the alternative was chaos. The first hour of the practice lane changed my public status more than any speech could have. People saw the training dummy take weak strikes and wince like anyone else. They saw Amero Rina run out of mana and force a pause. They saw Genbu drag a reckless player out by the collar. They saw Toki reject 3 hits because the players could not explain whether they were attacking or demonstrating. the radius grew slowly enough to be understood. A faint ring around my boots, then a ring wide enough for a rabbit to hit before biting, then a ring that made the grass tremble, then a ring that touched the dummy stake. Every stage was marked in the dirt. That was the visual language the crowd needed. Power that grows too fast looks like cheating. Power that grows by centimeters looks like a system anyone can follow. A young archer asked, "Can you kill a wolf now?" I answered honestly, "Maybe if the wolf hits me first and does not kill me." A flame mage said, "So you are still useless if nothing attacks you?" Yes, that answer confused him more than bragging would have. The training dummy class was not a sword hidden in a joke. It was a shield that only existed after someone tried to break it. That made me useful, but it also made me dependent on enemy choices, ally positioning, and HP math. The first player who understood the danger was not Genbu or Toki. It was a basic cook. She had been watching while holding a small frying pan like a shield. Her tag gave minor heat resistance and stamina recovery. Nobody had invited her to the front line. She stepped forward anyway and pointed at the growing crowd. The cook said, "If this keeps working, people will rush the line." She was right, the crowd wanted hope. Hope creates pressure. Players who had been useless 5 minutes ago wanted to contribute a weak hit. Players with stronger classes wanted to prove they were still stronger. Guild scouts wanted data. Scared beginners wanted to stand inside the ring. So we created lanes: hit lane, heal lane, exit lane, watcher lane. Genbu guarded the hit lane. Amero stayed in the heal lane. Toki controlled the watcher lane from the fence. I stood at the center with the first dummy stake beside me and learned that becoming powerful did not make the world simpler. It made the world gather around you. That was why the Boar King had so many people in its path. The practice lane had become the safest visible place in the field. The boss was about to prove how fragile that safety still was. The practice lane also taught us how public hope can become dangerous. A young flame mage asked if he could hit me with a tiny spark. He promised it was weak. The problem was that his class bonus made the spark stronger when he was nervous. And he was very nervous. Toki May saw the spell circle brighten before he released it. She snapped an arrow into the dirt between us. The spell fizzled. The flame mage flinched back. I said it was weak. Toki pointed at the ring around his hand. Your skill disagreed. Genbu made a fifth rule after that. No skills in the hit lane, only controlled physical taps. That sounded unfair to mages, but fairness was not the goal. Survival was. A mage who could not control a spell under fear did not get to test it on someone whose real body would die if the numbers were wrong. A basic monk solved the fairness problem by offering open palm taps for the casters who wanted to help. A cook timed stamina breaks. A tamer kept rabbit packs from crowding the lane by circling them at a distance. A healer with barely any mana carried water because Amero's throat was going dry from calling HP checks. The scene looked messy from above, but every person had a reason to be there. They were not worshipping me. They were building a method around a power that could kill its user if they got careless. When a wolf pack wandered near the field, nobody screamed and ran in a random direction. The players had learned too much for that. Genbu called shields left. Toki marked the lead wolf. Mages backed up because their skills were banned from the hit lane but not from defending the field edge. Archers fired at the ground to turn the pack, not to show off. One wolf lunged into my radius and staggered. It did not die. That made the crowd understand another limit. The radius could destroy rabbits now. It could punish weak player hits. It could slow a wolf. It could not delete everything on contact just because the visual looked impressive. I had to earn each threshold. The wolves retreated only after normal players wounded them enough that their next lunges fed my counter safely. That moment mattered because the story did not turn every other class useless. They created the conditions that let the training dummy function without dying. By the end of the lane session, the first dummy stake had so many scratch marks it looked like a measuring ruler made by a nervous carpenter. 1 centimeter, 10, 30, half a meter. One full step. The visual was simple enough for the crowd and the viewer to understand. The circle was growing, so was the danger of people assuming it had already grown enough. The Ironhide Boar King spawned because the field had been farmed too hard. That was what the system claimed later, and for once I believed it. Hundreds of frightened players had been killing rabbits nonstop, trying to level before something worse found them. The practice lane only added to the chaos. Monsters died at the edge of my growing radius. Rabbits spawned faster, players shouted. The field became a grinding pit with a death game sky above it. Then the ground shook. A boss bar opened across the horizon. Ironhide Boar King field boss, level unknown. The forest beyond the rabbit field split apart as a boar the size of a wagon charged through the trees. Its hide looked like dark iron plates. Broken tusks curved forward like hooked blades. Each step through dust high enough to hide the grass. Players did not run away because they were stupid. They ran because the first shield knight who tried to block it lost half his HP through a raised shield and flew backward into 2 other players. The second reason they ran was the boss's charge path. It pointed straight toward the crowded practice lane. Genbu Ryo planted his shield. Everyone behind the fence line. Toki May climbed onto a broken post and shouted, its left tusk drags lower. The right shoulder is the main impact. Amero Rina grabbed my arm. No, I was already looking at my panel. HP full, counter damage high enough to drop rabbits before contact. Reflection radius, wide enough to cover the practice lane. Unknown boss impact, lethal if misread. A red warning blinked in the hidden log. Fatal hits do not record. Amero Rina saw me reading. No, she said again, that is not math. That is guessing, it is aiming, I said. Genbu Ryo turned, at what? The weak part of the charge. The Boar King lowered its head. Toki Mei's scout sight marked 3 red lines in the air. Tusk path, shoulder path, hoof shock. The tusks kill you, she said. The shoulder might not. The hoof shock is environmental, it will not feed your counter. That was a good reason not to stand there. It was also the exact reason the lane would die if no one did. The boss was not just attacking me. It was charging a crowd. If I moved, the shoulder path would hit the weak players behind me. If I stood wrong, the tusk path would kill me. If I tried to reflect the hoof shock, nothing would happen. Genbu Ryo understood the same moment I did. He slammed his shield into the dirt at my left side. Then we cut the tusk angle. Amero Rina cursed under her breath and wrapped both hands in light stitch. I can keep you topped until impact. After that, if you are wrong, I cannot heal dead. Toki Mei drew a glowing mark over the boss's right shoulder. Stand there, not one step left. The crowd did not run far. Some froze, some hid behind fences. Some stayed because their friends were in the lane. Nobody had the luxury of clean heroism. They had fear, bad options, and a weird training dummy with a visible circle around his feet. I stepped into the marked line. The Boar King hit me before the crowd finished screaming. Its charge tore through the rabbit fence, threw dirt across the field, and slammed straight into my braced shoulder. My HP dropped to 3. For one silent heartbeat, the world became a red bar. Then the hidden log opened. Hostile hit survived. Counter reflection triggered. The blue-gray radius snapped outward from my body, caught the force stored from every survived hit, and returned it through the boss's own charge. The Boar King's HP bar exploded backward. Iron plates cracked across its hide. Its charge stopped dead. The massive body staggered once, twice, and shattered into system light. The public log opened over the field. Iron Hide Boar King defeated. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. Protection credit generated. Counter source hostile charge. The crowd did not cheer immediately. They were too busy reading the last line. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. Toki Mei lowered her bow. Genbu Ryo stared at his shield, then at me. Amero Rina grabbed my collar and healed me with enough force to make green light burst from my shoulders. Amero Rina said, you were at 3 HP. I know, if you say that one more time, I am letting Genbu Ryo hit you. Genbu Ryo said weakly. Amero Rina said emotionally. That was the first time anyone laughed after Full Soul Sync. Outside the game, the Emergency Dive Response Center did not laugh. Director Shizuka Rei watched the impossible kill log appear across 3 different monitoring screens. 0 attack, 0 damage dealt. Field boss defeated. Then a 4th screen opened by itself. Account ID matched. First server record found. Status deceased. Class protocol training dummy. Director Shizuka went very still. Because I was alive inside Edenfall. And according to the old server, I had already died once. Before I stepped into the Boar King's charge, other players tried every normal answer. That part mattered. A shield knight party formed first. 3 shields locked together across the field road. A healer stood behind them. A flame mage began charging a fireball. An archer team climbed the fence posts to get better angles. They were not cowards, they were underleveled. The Boar King hit the first shield wall and sent all 3 tanks sliding backward through the dirt. Their shields held for one breath. Then their HP bars dropped so hard the healers screamed. The flame mage's fireball splashed across the iron hide and produced a damage number so small that nobody cheered. The archer team aimed at the eyes, but the boss lowered its head and the arrows skittered across metal plates. The public learned the same thing I did. They could fight, they could not stop it in time. The boss was not chasing a random hero moment. Its path made sense. The practice lane had the highest player density, the most recent monster deaths, and the most protection credit activity. In system terms, it was the field's loudest threat cluster. The Boar King chose the crowd because the crowd had become a target. That made my choice less heroic and more practical. If it hit the practice lane, people died. If it hit me wrong, I died. If it hit me right, we learned whether the entire morning had meant something. Toki Mei climbed the tallest fence post despite the tremor in the ground. Her scout archer tag flashed as she traced the boss's movement. 3 lines appeared to her sight and then to everyone else after she shared the mark. Red tusk line, orange shoulder line, brown hoof shock. Toki said the tusk line is fatal. The hoof shock is environmental. The shoulder line is the only one that might count. Genbu Ryo moved before I asked. He planted his shield at an angle not in front of the boss but beside my position. That was smarter. If he tried to block the whole charge, he would die or get thrown aside. If he shaved the tusk line away from my body, he might turn a lethal impact into a survivable one. Amero Rina did not give me a dramatic speech. She checked my HP, checked her mana, and said, if you are wrong, I cannot fix it. I know, no, you know numbers. I want you to know the person saying it. That landed harder than the warning panel. For the first time, I understood what my class looked like from outside. I was not only risking my own bar. I was asking other people to trust that the gray tag over my head would not become a death marker in front of them. The Boar King lowered its head. The crowd stopped breathing. Amero's light stitch filled me to full. Genbu braced. Toki held the shoulder mark steady. I stepped into the orange line. Impact. The world became iron and dust. My HP fell so fast I did not see the numbers between full and 3. The hidden log did. It caught the last one. It caught the fact that I was still alive. 3 HP hostile boss charge survived. Counter reflection triggered. The radius did not explode like a spell. It compressed first, like a breath pulled into my ribs. Every rabbit bite, every weak player strike, every hostile shove, every controlled test. All of it gathered into the one place the boss had chosen to hit. Then it returned. The Boar King's own charge ran backward through its body. Its iron plates cracked from the inside. The boss fell apart in system light before the Flame Mage's second fireball could finish charging. The archer team on the fence stared at their unused arrows. The shield knights who had been thrown back stared at their broken formation. Genbu lowered his shield by 1 inch. Amero healed me before the crowd remembered how to cheer. The public log did not care about anyone's feelings. It printed the only line that mattered. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru, 0. That line turned the field into a rumor engine. It also turned me into an emergency file. The Boar King fallout lasted longer than the fight. That was important because a public payoff is only useful if the world reacts to it. The first reaction was silence. The second was denial. A flame mage who had barely scratched the boss shouted that someone else must have landed the real killing blow. The archer team checked their logs and found nothing. The shield knights checked theirs and found only blocked damage and pain. Every panel returned to the same impossible center. Hikari Haru damage dealt 0, protection credit massive. Counter source hostile charge. The system tried to distribute loot and failed. Standard damage contribution reward unavailable. Damage contribution below threshold. Protection category review pending. The crowd almost turned on me again right there. That was how fragile public belief can be. They had seen the boss shatter, but if the loot system said I had not contributed, some players were ready to believe the system over their own eyes. Then a second panel opened. Non-combat survivor title condition met. Emergency protection credit generated. Field casualties prevented, estimated high. The title did not give me boss loot. It gave me legitimacy. That was better for the story. If I had received normal loot, the 0 damage rule would feel like a fake restriction. Instead, the system rewarded the one thing I had actually done. Survived and protected. Genbu Ryo read the panel and said, so even the system knows you did not attack. Amero Rina said, it also knows he almost died. Toki Mei pointed at the 3 HP record still glowing red in the log. Everyone knows that record protected the tension. No one could claim I was invincible while the number 3 sat there like a warning label. At the EDRC, Director Shizuka did not just see an impossible boss kill. She saw a casualty prevention event tied to an account that should not exist. Her staff tried to open the full first server record, but most of it was blacked out. One visible line remained. Training dummy protocol deployed. Another line flickered underneath. Outcome deceased. Director Shizuka did not know me yet. She knew only that a living boy in a locked capsule had a dead account stamped behind him. That was enough to keep her watching. Back in Edenfall, the Boar King's death left behind one more problem. The field was safer for the moment, which meant more players wanted to stand near me. A safe place attracts the people who need safety. It also attracts people who want to sell it. That was why the next arc could not simply be more farming. The first boss proof made me visible to guilds. The Boar King incident changed everything. Players who had laughed at the training dummy tag now watched the edge of my radius before they watched monster spawns. Low-level players started asking where they could stand safely. Guild scouts appeared at the edge of the field, pretending they were not measuring me. The system gave me no normal loot because my damage contribution was still 0, but it did give me something stranger. Non-combat survivor, protection credit unlocked. The title did not make me stronger. It made the world admit I had done something. That was enough to create the next problem. A group of wounded players near the ruined mill sent a request through the field chat. Goblin patrols had blocked the road back to the starter gate. Several players were trapped behind a broken water wheel. Their healer was out of mana. Their tank had a cracked shield. The goblins were not strong enough to be boss monsters, but there were too many of them. And full soul sync made every small mistake heavy. I did not go because I wanted to look heroic. I went because the route back to town crossed the same field where the practice lane stood. If the goblins pushed through the mill, the starter players would be trapped between the gate and the forest. Cause and effect had become simple. If the weak players fell, the field collapsed. If the field collapsed, the practice lane vanished. If the practice lane vanished, I stopped scaling safely. So I went. Amero Rina came because my HP management was her problem now. By her own annoyed declaration. Genbu Ryo came because he refused to let a zero-armor training dummy lead a rescue formation without a shield. Toki Mei came because goblin ambush lines annoyed her. The ruined mill looked like a broken toy built over a muddy stream. The water wheel leaned sideways, beams sagged. goblins moved between the wooden walls with short blades and poison darts. The first goblin swordsmen attacked directly. Those were easy. Too easy. They hit my radius, the stored counter snapped back, and they collapsed into light before reaching the trapped players. The wounded group cheered. Then the poison goblin appeared on the roof beam. Tokime shouted dart. The dart nicked my arm. The hidden log stayed dark. Green poison crawled across my HP bar. No stack, no reflection, no counter. Amero Rina's face sharpened. Move. Another dart hit the dirt near my boot and burst into mist. Environmental poison field, no stack, HP dropping. Genbu Ryo raised his shield and shoved me behind it. So that is how they fight you. Not me, I said, watching the poison icon blink. Anyone who thinks my radius solves everything. The goblin poisoner laughed from the roof beam. It had no reason to fear me because it had already found the gap in the rule. Tokime fired a warning arrow at the beam, not to kill but to force movement. Genbu Ryo shifted his shield to block the next dart. Amero Rina wrapped purity-colored light around my arm, though she did not have the evolved version yet. At this stage it was still light stitch, and poison fought it like mud in clean water. The rescue became a puzzle. Direct goblin hits fed me. Poison darts did not. Falling beams did not. Panic shoves did not. If I stood still, poison would kill me without giving a single stack. If I charged forward, the roof goblins would target the trapped players instead. If Genbu Ryo chased them, the direct goblins would break through the lower lane. So we made them choose. Tokime marked the poison goblins firing angles with pale blue scout lines. Genbu Ryo moved his shield to make every safe poison angle disappear. Amero Rina kept my HP above the danger line with small, painful heel ticks. I stood where the sword goblins had to hit me to reach the wounded players. The poison goblin got impatient. It threw a dart directly at Amero Rina. That was a hostile hit with an owner. I stepped into the path. The dart pierced my shoulder before the poison spread. The impact counted, the toxin still hurt, but the hit belonged to the goblin. Counter reflection snapped back through the direct dart line and knocked the poisoner off the beam. Tokime's arrow pinned its sleeve to the broken wood long enough for Genbu Ryo to shield bash the beam under it. The goblin fell into my radius and dissolved from its own hostile chain. The rescue worked because everyone did something that made sense. Amero Rina did not become a miracle healer. She bought seconds. Genbu Ryo did not pretend to outdamage goblins. He shaped angles. Tokime did not snipe everything. She identified lines. I did not attack. I stood where hostile force had to declare itself. When we brought the wounded players back through the mill, the public saw the second truth after the Boar King. Training dummy could be the strongest thing in the field. Poison could still kill him. The ruined mill rescue could have become a simple escort if the goblins were stupid. They were not. The sword goblins attacked first because they were disposable. They rushed low, fast, and loud. Their job was to make players look at the ground. While Genbu blocked the front and I stood where direct strikes had to cross my radius, the real threat climbed the roof beams. Tokime saw it. She did not shout immediately. Shouting too early makes panic players look up and break formation. She marked the roofline with a pale blue scout flare and called only the people who could use the information. 12 o'clock beam, Toki said, small caster. Dart hand, Amero moved my heel thread higher along my arm. Genbu shifted his shield half a step. I let the sword goblin hit my radius and collapse. That was when the poison dart landed. It did not feel like a boss strike. It felt like a needle of heat. The HP drop was small at first. Then the green debuff appeared and the numbers started ticking down without any new hit. No stack, no reflection. The system was brutally consistent. The dart impact had been too glancing to count through my braced radius. And the poison effect itself was not a hostile hit I could return. It was a condition, a problem after the hit, not the hit itself. Amero Rina understood before I did. Poison is not force, she said. Genbu blocked another dart. Then what do we do? Stop letting poison become the fight. That was why the rescue worked. Amero did not try to out-heal the entire debuff. She called the wounded players into pairs and told each pair to watch one poison icon. Genbu did not chase the poisoner. He held the lower lane so the trapped group could move. Toki did not try to kill the roof goblin through cover. She marked every time it showed its hand. The wounded players helped too. One cook used a pot lid to reflect sunlight into the goblin's eyes. A farmer jabbed a pole into the broken water wheel so it stopped turning and blocked one dart angle. A low-level tamer sent a bird up under the roof, not to attack, just to make the goblin move. That forced the poisoner into a direct throw. I saw the arm come forward. This time I stepped into the dart on purpose. Not the poison cloud, the dart. Impact first. Poison second. The hidden log opened on the impact. Hostile projectiles survived. Counter reflection available. The return force shot back along the dart's ownership line. The goblin poisoner was not destroyed by my attack. It was knocked from the beam by its own hostile throw. Genbu's shield caught it before it could land on the wounded players. And Toki's arrow pinned the sleeve long enough for the direct goblins to break formation. The mill rescue became the first time players saw my weakness and still trusted the plan. That mattered more than another boss kill. A perfect power makes spectators lazy. A limited power makes allies necessary. By the time we reached the road back to the starter plaza, the wounded players were not chanting my name. They were thanking Amero for healing, Genbu for blocking, Toki for marking, and even the cook for the pot lid. That was the first glimpse of what Counter Shelter would become. Not a place where everyone waited for me to win. A place where everyone could survive long enough to do their part. The Iron Crown Alliance arrived before sunset. That was not villain timing, that was logistics. Major guilds move toward useful assets. They move faster when the asset has no normal damage score, no guild, no contract protection, and a public tag that still makes half the player base think he can be owned like equipment. Their envoy was Satoshi Kai. Gold-trimmed coat, calm smile, contract scrolls floating behind him like obedient birds. His class tag Red Seal Advocate. Not a combat monster, but dangerous in a way that did not need a sword. Satoshi Kai bowed just low enough to look polite. Satoshi Kai said, Hikari Haru, Iron Crown would like to offer you formal protection. Genbu Ryo muttered, here it comes. Satoshi Kai ignored him and opened a contract panel. The wording looked beautiful: escort support, healing access, guild residence, resource priority, protection from harassment. Then I read the clause under asset deployment. Iron Crown may assign the contracted party's defensive and offensive output to approved raid formations. Satoshi Kai watched my eyes reach the line. He smiled a little more. The old crowd would have expected me to panic or sign. The new crowd leaned in. I asked, what offensive output? Satoshi Kai's smile thinned. I opened my public panel. Attack damage 0, weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Damage contribution permanently 0. The contract seal flickered. Satoshi Kai said, the clause refers to practical output. The line says offensive output. The seal flickered again. A few players laughed. Satoshi Kai adjusted smoothly. Then we revised the phrase. No, I said. You already showed me what you want to own. His eyes sharpened. For the first time, the polished smile looked like a blade. Iron Crown did not attack me. That would be stupid. A direct hostile hit might feed my counter. Instead, they moved toward the crowd. Another guild member opened smaller panels. Shelter access agreement, priority protection list, emergency survivor sponsorship. Weak players stared at the contracts with hungry fear. After full soul sink, safety was worth anything. If a guild could sell a place near my radius, people would buy it even if the contract was a chain. That was when Part 2's rule entered Part 1 early. Amero Rina stepped beside me. Can your radius protect someone who signs under pressure? The system answered before I did. Protection link requires voluntary consent. Consent status, unstable under coercive contract conditions. Forced shelter link rejected. Satoshi Kai's expression changed. Not anger, interest. He had found a new system category. That made him dangerous. I planted the first dummy stake in the dirt between the crowd and Iron Crown. Then I opened a blank shelter prompt. No guild seal, no fee, no ownership clause. Just 3 lines, temporary shelter consent. Protected player may withdraw at any time. No damage, class, item, or account ownership transfers. The prompt glowed blue-gray. Players touched it one by one. Some did not. That mattered too. Consent that cannot be refused is just a prettier trap. Iron Crown could not own my damage. It could not own my shelter. It could still make the next move. Satoshi Kai snapped his fingers. A non-lethal dual flag opened. One of Iron Crown's mages raised both hands. Then prove your protection is not illegal. The mage fired a compressed light bolt at my chest. Genbu Ryo moved, but I lifted one hand. The hit was hostile. The dual flag made it non-lethal. I survived. Counter reflection returned the bolt into the mage's own barrier. The barrier shattered. His HP did not drop to 0, but his gear durability screamed red. The audit system opened above us. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. Hostile force returned to origin. Protection category unresolved. Causality review required. The crowd saw the word causality. That word saved us from 100 lines of exposition. The system was finally asking the right question. Not whether I dealt damage, I did not. Whether my survival caused hostile force to return. It did. Satoshi Kai closed his contract panels slowly. He had not won, but he had learned. And smart enemies are never wasted scenes. Satoshi Kai did not make the mistake of threatening me. That was why the scene worked. A stupid guild envoy would have attacked the famous counter player and fed the exact mechanic everyone had just seen. Satoshi was not stupid. He brought contracts, witnesses, polite wording, and a public audience. He did not need to beat me if he could make the crowd believe order required ownership. His first offer sounded reasonable because the best traps usually do. Iron Crown would provide healers. Iron Crown would provide guards. Iron Crown would manage shelter access. Iron Crown would protect the training dummy from harassment. The contract even used my new public title, non-combat survivor. Then it reached for output. Satoshi Kai watched my eyes while I read. He wanted to know if I would react emotionally. I did not give him that. I opened the public panel instead. Attack damage 0, weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Damage contribution permanently 0. A contract can only own something that exists. The gold seal stuttered when it tried to bind offensive output. It stuttered again when it tried to bind damage contribution. The third time a crack appeared through the claws. The crowd saw it, Satoshi saw the crowd see it. That was why he pivoted. He did not argue over the broken claws. He smiled, stepped aside, and let another Iron Crown member open smaller shelter agreements toward the frightened players behind me. That was smarter and uglier. Priority protection list. Guild-sponsored safety placement, emergency shelter access. The contracts were not aimed at me. They were aimed at fear. A low-level healer reached for one. A farmer hesitated. A wounded archer stared at the clause that said Iron Crown could assign protected player position during emergencies. Amero Rina caught my sleeve. They are not buying your damage, she said. They are buying the people who need the radius. Satoshi's smile returned because he knew we had understood too late. Then the system helped us by being exact. Protection link requires voluntary consent. Coercive or transferable shelter claims rejected. That line did not solve the problem. It gave us a weapon. I wrote a new prompt with Satoshi watching every word. Temporary shelter consent. Protected player may withdraw at any time. No class, account, damage, item, or body ownership transfers. No guild priority, no forced assignment. A player may leave without penalty. The prompt turned blue-gray. The Iron Crown contracts turned dull gold. The crowd compared them. That was the legal armor beat at its strongest. It was not me being clever in a vacuum. It was frightened people being given 2 doors and finally seeing one had a lock on the outside. The first farmer touched my prompt. The shelter accepted, a healer touched it next. Then the cook with the pot lid. Then a shield knight from the failed Boar King wall. Satoshi Kai's expression did not break, it tightened. He did not hate the rule because it was emotional. He hated it because it was clean. So he forced a dual test. The Iron Crown mage who stepped forward had a reason. His guild needed public proof that my protection was illegal, unstable, or too dangerous to trust. He did not think he could kill me under a non-lethal dual flag. He wanted to make the system judge me. The light bolt hit my chest. I survived. Counter-reflection returned the force into his barrier. His barrier shattered. His HP remained above 0. The audit panel opened because Satoshi had gotten exactly one thing right. The system did not yet know what to call me. Damage dealt 0, causality unresolved. The crowd murmured. Satoshi Kai looked up at the word causality and smiled like a man who had lost one argument but found a bigger courtroom. That was the correct ending for the arc. He did not disappear as a fool. He left as someone who now understood where the next pressure point was. Satoshi Kai's shelter contracts created a smaller crisis before the duel. A group of frightened players had already touched the Iron Crown panels. Not because they were greedy. Because the Boar King had nearly run them over, the goblins had trapped their friends. And the system had locked their real bodies behind full soul sync. Fear makes bad paperwork look like a lifeline. When my plain consent prompt appeared, those players did not instantly switch. That would have been too easy. One archer looked at Satoshi and then at me. The archer said, Iron Crown has healers. You have 1 healer and a fence post. Amero Rina said, accurate, rude but accurate. Satoshi Kai used that opening. He said, a shelter without administration becomes a stampede. A stampede kills weak players first. Iron Crown is offering order. That argument was not nonsense. That was what made it dangerous. I could not answer with guild bad. People had seen chaos. They wanted order. The real question was whether order required ownership. So I changed the prompt. Temporary shelter consent. Protected player may withdraw at any time. No ownership transfer. No guild priority. No forced assignment. Crowd capacity visible. If the shelter was full, the panel would say full. No secret priority list. No payment slot. No hidden officer override. The system accepted the wording. A blue-gray number appeared above the state. Shelter capacity limited. That line hurt my pride and helped my credibility. I was not pretending everyone could fit. I was saying nobody could buy a place from someone else. The archer who had questioned me touched the prompt. The mark appeared on his wrist. Then he pulled his hand back. The mark vanished. He blinked. I can leave. Yes, I said. He touched it again. This time the mark stayed because the choice had become real. Satoshi Kai watched that exchange carefully. He had lost a sale, but he had found a principle. The dual test that followed was his attempt to break that principle in front of the crowd. If my protection was illegal, Iron Crown order would look necessary again. If my reflection harmed bystanders, guild control would look reasonable. If the audit opened, he could move the argument into system law. That was why he accepted the barrier-shattering loss with such a calm face. The fight was never only about the mage. It was about who would be allowed to define safety. Urami came at night. No guild banner. No speech. No dramatic rooftop pose until after the first trap had already been set. A gray smoke flower opened under the nearest dummy stake. The stake did not break. It did not count as a hit. It simply released poison mist around the players standing inside the new shelter marks. Amero Rina shouted back. The marked players stumbled away, coughing as green debuff icons appeared over their HP bars. My radius did nothing. The poison mist had no impact line. No direct hostile strike, no weapon hit I could survive. It was an environmental effect released by a trap. The system did not give me a clean owner. Rejected indirect hazard, counter reflection unavailable. That was Vira Mio's introduction. She appeared on the mill roof, gray cloak shifting in the wind, thin silver needles between her fingers. Her class tag was Pale Needle. Vira Mio said, a training dummy that only answers direct hits is not a wall. It is a door with lazy hinges. Genbu Ryo raised his shield. Come down and say that. Vira Mio looked at him. No, reasonable. She was an assassin. Her job was not to be fair. Her job was to test whether the famous counter radius could be killed by something that never technically attacked it. Sato Shikai had probably paid for the test. Iron Crown denied it later badly. Vira Mio's second trap dropped a loose signboard from a roof. Falling object, no stack. Her third trap used panic civilians as moving blockers. Neutral movement, no stack. Her fourth trap placed poison between me and Amero Rina. Healing line interrupted. That almost killed me. Not because Virami O was stronger than the Boar King. Because she understood the rule better than the crowd did. I could not solve her by being tough. So we built. Tokime marked every suspicious angle with scout lines. Genbu Ryo used his shield to create lanes that civilians could move through without becoming accidental blockers. Amero Rina changed her light stitch into a thread web, not stronger healing but safer routing. I moved the dummy stakes into a square around the lane instead of a circle around myself. A simple shape appeared. Outer lane Genbu Ryo. Healer lane Amero Rina. Scout marks Tokime. Anchor center me. Voluntary shelter marks players who chose to stand inside. Release line open. When Vira Mio dropped the next trap, it landed on the outer lane. Genbu Ryo blocked the physical weight. No stack for me. The Tokime's scout mark caught the wire pull. Vira Mio had touched the trigger. Owner found. I stepped into the wire line before she could cut it. The trap snapback hit my shoulder. Hostile mechanism contact survived. Counter-reflection returned through the wire path. The rooftop under Vira Mio cracked. She flipped away before the impact reached her. Smart, she had not come to die. She had come to prove I could be killed indirectly. And she had if I stayed simple. The new formation did not make me invincible. It made the enemy work harder to hide ownership. That was enough for counter-shelter to awaken. System alert, protected hostile interception recorded. Consent marks confirmed. Counter-shelter seed unlocked. The blue-gray radius changed shape. It no longer hugged only my body. Thin rings appeared around each marked player who had chosen the shelter. The rings were weak. They needed my bracing. They drained stamina so fast my knees nearly buckled. But when a goblin arrow from outside the lane struck a marked player, the force bent toward my anchor stake, passed through my radius, and returned to the attacker. The player survived. I nearly fell. Amero Rina caught my arm. Vira Mio watched from the roofline. For the first time, she looked interested instead of amused. Vira Mio said, now that is a door with teeth. Then she vanished. She did not need to lose the arc for the arc to matter. Her attack forced the story to evolve. Vira Mio's first trap was not meant to kill me. It was meant to embarrass the shelter. That made it worse. The smoke flower bloomed under a dummy stake and spread in a perfect circle. Just wide enough to touch 3 marked players and not me. Their HP bars started ticking down. My hidden log did nothing. The crowd saw the blue-gray consent marks fail in the most public way possible. A direct attacker would have made me look strong. Vira made me look incomplete. That was her skill. She understood that assassination is not always a blade in the back. Sometimes it is proving that the hero's safest place has a leak. Her second trap hit the exit lane. Not the people, the lane. A signboard fell, splitting the path and forcing 2 shelter players to stumble into each other. Neutral movement, no stack, no reflection. Her third trap rolled a smoke capsule between Amero and me. It did not damage me. It blocked the heal line at the worst possible moment. Amero's jaw tightened. She is not attacking you, Amero said. Genbu raised his shield toward the roof. She is attacking the rules around him. That was exactly right. Tokime began marking not enemies but causes. Wire trigger, rooftop footstep, smoke capsule arc. Falling sign bracket. Every mark turned the alley from chaos into a diagram. Vira noticed. For the first time, a silver needle landed near Toki instead of me. Genbu blocked it. The needle released harmless gray smoke on his shield and printed a tiny system tag. Impact owner concealed. Vira was testing whether her own ownership could be hidden. Toki smiled without humor. Thank you, she said. She had baited a sample. The next few minutes were a duel between a scout and an assassin, with me as the dangerous terrain in the middle. Vira tried to make hazards look environmental. Toki marked the hand that made them move. Genbu forced falling objects into shield angles. Amero threaded heals around smoke pockets instead of through them. I moved the dummy stakes one by one until the shelter stopped being a circle and became a set of lanes. Vira's fourth trap was the one that unlocked the seed. She triggered a wire attached to a chimney brick. The brick fell toward a marked player. Environmental, no stack, but Toki had marked the wire. Genbu knocked the player aside without breaking the consent line. I stepped into the wire's snapback as Vira cut it. The recoil struck my palm, tiny damage. Hostile mechanism contact, survived. The reflection ran back along the cut wire. It did not hit Vera directly, she had already moved. It hit the rooftop anchor she had used, shattering the tile under her boot and forcing her to retreat. The crowd saw the difference. We did not beat the trap by pretending traps counted. We beat it by finding the moment a person owned the trap. That lesson became counter-shelter. The system alert opened above the dummy stakes. Protected hostile interception recorded. Consent marks confirmed. Counter-shelter seed unlocked. The marked player's rings brightened, but my knees nearly gave out. Amaro caught me. That cost mattered. Counter-shelter was not a free bubble. It was a debt my body paid in stamina, focus, and HP risk. The more people stood inside, the more carefully everyone else had to work. Vera Mio watched from the roofline. She could have thrown another poison flower. She did not. Her job had been to prove the shelter was flawed. She had succeeded. The fact that the flaw made us stronger was not her problem yet. She vanished into the rooftops with one final line. Vera Mio said, "Next time I will not leave the wire visible." Good, the next time we would have to be smarter too. Director Shizuka contacted me after the counter-shelter seed unlocked. Her EDRC window opened above the plaza with a redacted file behind her. Director Shizuka said, "Hikari Haru, I found why your capsule ID matched a deceased record." The plaza quieted. I could have ignored her. I should have rested. My HP was stable, but counter-shelter had drained something deeper than HP. Every marked ally felt like a thread tied to my ribs. But the file behind Director Shizuka had my old tag on it. Training dummy protocol, first server, status deceased. Commander Vale Eren. The moment that name appeared, the system opened a door under my feet. Not a flashback, an active echo zone. The world glitched, the plaza vanished. I stood in an old raid arena with faded UI, broken party frames, and ghost silhouettes moving around me like recorded players. The system did not ask permission. It tried to run the old script. First server echo initializing. Training dummy assigned to bait position. Raid commander authority detected. A black-silver armored man stood on the far side of the arena. Vale Eren, not fully real, not fully memory. An echo with enough system authority to hurt me if I obeyed the script. His voice was calm. Vale Eren said, "Dummy unit advance." The old party frames showed what happened if I did. Boss aggro would lock on me. Raid damage would pass through my body. The commander would clear the room. The training dummy would be recorded as used. Not protected, not saved. Used. A ghost player near me wore a tag that read cracked banner. The script marked him as acceptable loss too. He looked at me without speaking because echoes do not get to ask for help. That made the choice simple. I stepped away from the bait marker and stood in front of cracked banner. The system screamed, "Bait route deviation. Training dummy must occupy assigned impact point." Vale Eren's echo turned toward me. Vale Eren said, "You were made for the hit." I looked at the ghost behind me. No, I said, I was left there. The old raid boss attacked. The hit was stronger than anything since the Boar King. I survived only because the Echo Zone used old damage values and because Amero Rina's light stitch still burned through my real body from outside the instance. The hidden log opened. Hostile hit survived. Bait script rejected. Protection intent confirmed. Guardian route unlocked. The blue-gray radius flared around me and the ghost player. For the first time, the system called my class something besides training dummy. Guardian anchor first stage. The Echo arena cracked. Vale Eren's recorded face sharpened. Like something behind the Echo had noticed, I was no longer following the dead file. Vale Eren said, so the discarded account woke. The Echo collapsed before he could say more. I returned to the plaza on one knee. Amero Rina was beside me, hands glowing. Genbu Ryo had his shield up. Toki Mei had an arrow pointed at the empty space where the Echo door had been. Director Shizuka's face was pale in the EDRC window. Director Shizuka said, that was not only a recording. Something answered from the first server archive. I looked at my tag, training dummy. Counter shelter, guardian anchor I then the public leak hit. Every player in Edenfall received a distorted message. Warning, deceased first server account detected. Illegal anchor activity suspected. Report Hikari Haru for deletion review. The crowd that had started trusting me looked up at the warning. Fear returned, not all of it, not like before. But enough, that was how the audit tribunal entered the story. The Echo Zone did not ask me to remember. It tried to make me obey. That was the difference between a flashback and a present threat. The old raid arena loaded around my feet with system lines already moving. Party frames appeared in the air. They were faded, but the orders were not. Dummy unit to impact point. Shield group hold until extraction. Damage dealers prepare burst phase. Acceptable loss markers applied. One marker appeared over me. Another appeared over cracked banner. The ghost player looked barely older than I was. His banner was split down the middle, the emblem unreadable. He did not speak at first because the old script had not given him a line. He only stood where the system told him to stand, waiting to become a number in someone else's clear. Vale Aren's echo stood above the raid floor. He was not shouting, he did not need to. Every order appeared as a system-backed command. Vale Aren said, tools do not choose position. The bait marker under my feet glowed red. If I stepped onto it, the raid boss would target me. The old party would clear the phase. The system would record the training dummy as used. The old file would remain true. Status deceased. That was the script trying to close around me. I looked at Cracked Banner. His acceptable loss marker pulsed faster. The raid boss at the far end of the arena opened one massive eye. It was not important what the boss looked like. The boss was a function. It existed to create a hit powerful enough for the old commander to spend someone else. Amero's healing thread flickered at the edge of the echo. Genbu's shield light flashed outside the boundary. Toki's scout marks scraped against the old UI but could not enter fully. They were not absent. They were reaching from the present, and that gave me one more reason not to obey the past. I stepped off the bait marker. The echo stuttered. Bait route deviation. Training dummy must occupy assigned impact point. I walked to Cracked Banner instead. The old UI tried to drag my tag backward. For 1 second, the gray training dummy label above me split into two versions, the old disposable class and the new shelter mark. Vale Aren's echo finally looked irritated. Correct your position. No, the raid boss attacked. I braced in front of Cracked Banner. The hit felt old, not weak, old. Like a command written before the system, new players would learn to resist it. That was the only reason it did not kill me. Amero's thread caught the last edge of my HP. Genbu's shield light grounded the echo boundary. Toki's scout mark held the boss line steady enough for me to take the survivable part instead of the fatal center. The hit landed, I survived. Perfect target recorded more than damage. Bait script rejected. Protection intent confirmed. Guardian route unlocked. Cracked Banner's acceptable loss marker shattered. For the first time, the ghost player moved by choice. He stepped back from the line, and the old raid formation collapsed because it had been built on someone staying where they were told to die. The echo could not handle that. Vale Aren's recorded face sharpened. Not a memory anymore, a connection. Vale Aren said, so the discarded account woke. The arena broke. I returned to the plaza with the sound of that sentence still in my ears. Then the public warning spread across Edenfall. Deceased first server account detected. Illegal anchor activity suspected. Report Hikari Haru for deletion review. The crowd did not instantly turn on me. That would have been too simple. Instead, they hesitated. And hesitation is dangerous because it can become trust or fear depending on the next proof. The audit tribunal arrived to decide which one. The echo zone left one object behind. A broken party frame hovered over the plaza stones after I returned. It should have vanished with the arena, but the frame stayed open, flickering between my living HP and the old deceased stamp. Director Shizuka saw it from the EDRC window. Director Shizuka said, do not touch it yet. Nobody touched it. That was one of the first signs the crowd had changed. At the beginning, half the plaza would have poked a cursed system window because it looked interesting. Now players made space because they had watched curiosity become lethal more than once. Tokime circled the frame and marked the faint red lines inside it. It is not attacking, she said. It is waiting for an order. Genbu Ryo moved his shield between the frame and the shelter marks anyway. Waiting things can still be dangerous. Satoshi Kai looked at the old party frame with an expression I did not like. That is command authority, he said. Not a contract, but close enough to smell like one. The old frame listed roles: Commander, Damage Group, Shield Group, Healer Group, Dummy Unit, Acceptable Loss. The last two lines were linked. Amero Rina's hand tightened around her staff. Amero said, the system wrote those as if they were the same category. That was the real wound inside the first server record. It was not only that Vale Aren had used a player as bait. It was that the old system had created vocabulary that made using someone sound like a normal raid assignment. The broken frame tried to update. Dummy unit unavailable. Replacement acceptable loss required. Every marked player in the shelter felt the tug. Not strong, not enough to move them. Enough to prove the old script was searching for someone else to spend. I slammed the dummy stake through the center of the frame. The stake did not attack. It grounded the command line. The hidden log stayed closed because there was no hostile hit yet. But the shelter mark stopped trembling. Satoshi Kai stared at the frame. I know how to break that wording, he said. Genbu gave him a look. You are enjoying this too much. No, Satoshi said, I am qualified to hate it. He opened a counterseal around the party frame. The line he wrote was simple. No role may be assigned acceptable loss status without chosen consent. The frame rejected the clause, then it attacked the seal. That made it hostile. I braced through the dummy stake. The command backlash crossed the anchor line and struck my radius. I survived. Counter-reflection returned the old command pressure into the broken party frame. The acceptable loss line cracked. It did not vanish completely. Not yet, but it could no longer search for a replacement. That small victory mattered because it made the first server threat concrete before Vale arrived physically. The past was not just haunting me. It was still trying to run. the audit tribunal did not arrive as a person. It arrived as a white red courtroom overlay dropped over the entire plaza. Every player inside the starter zone froze under rule chains made of light. Nobody was hurt, nobody was bound physically. But every system action paused, skills dimmed. Guild contracts locked. My counter shelter rings shrank to a thin pulse around each marked player. A faceless judge avatar appeared above the central fountain. Audit case opened. Subject Hikari Haru, class training dummy. Damage dealt 0, causality unresolved. Deletion review authorized. Amero Rina stepped forward. He saved people. The tribunal answered with a cold panel. Saving classification pending. Illegal reflection radius possible. Genbu Ryo slammed his shield down, then tested. That surprised me. It also surprised the tribunal. Genbu Ryo pointed at the public logs. If he attacks, delete him. If hostile force returns to its source after he survives it, classify it properly. The tribunal accepted. Calibration constructs spawned around the plaza. They were faceless white red figures with simple weapons and clean damage values. Good tests, no poison, no traps, no lies. At least at first, the first construct struck me directly. I survived, counter returned, the construct shattered. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru, 0. Hostile force returned to origin. The second construct attacked a marked volunteer inside the shelter. I braced, the hit bent through the consent mark, crossed my radius and returned. Protection credit confirmed. The third construct fired an arrow near me but labeled it accidental. It did not count. Tokime nodded. Correct. The fourth construct fired with hostile intent. It counted. The fifth construct released poison mist. My radius failed. Amero Rina rushed forward, but the tribunal paused her healing for one brutal second to see the result. My HP dropped, no stack, no reflection. The crowd saw it, that mattered. The audit was not just proving I was useful. It was proving I was limited. Amero Rina's face changed. Not fear, decision. She drove both hands into the poison mist and pulled Light Stitch apart into dozens of thin white threads. The green Deba fought them, her HP dipped. Her mana bar cracked red. But she kept pulling until the poison separated from the air in clean strands. System alert, healer class evolution condition met. Light Stitcher root advanced, purity thread unlocked. The poison broke, Amero Rina staggered and I caught her before she fell. The tribunal recorded everything. Poison bypass confirmed. Ally purge required. Training dummy not self-sufficient. Conditional guardian classification available. That phrase changed the plaza. Not illegal, conditional, not invincible. Guardian, the judge avatar lowered its head. Hikari Haru classified as conditional guardian anomaly. Deletion review suspended. Restrictions, direct damage remains 0. Weapon slot remains locked. Active attack skills remain locked. Counter shelter requires consent, bracing, and survivable hostile force. The crowd cheered, I did not. Because above the audit overlay, a black-silver spear point appeared in the sky. A voice I had only heard in the echo zone spoke across the plaza. Vale Air said, conditional. The system always did love polite words for broken tools. The audit tribunal was dangerous because it was not wrong. It had real questions. Had I dealt damage? No. Had enemies died around me? Yes. Could reflection kill someone who did not understand the rule? Yes. Could my shelter protect people? Yes. Could poison bypass it? Also yes. A bad story would make the audit stupid so I could look smart. Edenfall did not give me that luxury. The audit asked the questions the crowd needed answered before they could stand behind me without wondering whether they were standing near a bomb. Genbu Ryo understood that faster than anyone. He did not defend me with emotion. He demanded a test. That was why the tribunal accepted. The first calibration construct raised a sword and struck my shoulder. Clean hostile line, controlled damage, I survived. Reflection returned, the construct dissolved. The log showed 0 damage dealt by me. The second construct targeted a marked shelter volunteer. I stepped into the anchor line, braced through the dummy stake, and took the hostile force through the consent mark. The volunteer survived. The construct collapsed from its own attack. Protection credit increased. The third construct fired an arrow that skimmed my sleeve under a neutral label. No stack. The fourth fired with hostile intent. Stack recorded. Tokime nodded each time because the test matched what she had already proven in the rabbit field. Then the tribunal used poison. A green mist spread through the shrunken shelter ring. It did not hit like a blade. It did not care about my bracing. It lowered HP and smooth ticks while the hidden log stayed blank. The crowd saw the failure. That was painful. It was also necessary. Amero Rina stepped into the mist before I could stop her. Her light stitch threads turned green at the edges. She grimaced, pulled them apart, and forced the poison to separate from the air in thin strands. Her mana bar cracked red. Her HP dipped. The tribunal did not pause the test because mercy was not part of its function. Amero did not unlock purity thread because the story needed a healer upgrade. She unlocked it because poison had been a consistent, proven limitation, and she paid the cost to answer it. The system panel opened. Light Stitcher root advanced. Purity thread unlocked. Poison classification, purgeable under ally support. Training dummy self-sufficiency, false. conditional guardian classification available. That word false helped me. It meant the system recognized I was not an all-purpose solution. I could be powerful and still need people. I could be central and still incomplete. That made the shelter less like a cheat and more like a formation. The tribunal's final test was social. It projected 2 prompts. Forced shelter link, voluntary shelter link. The forced link was stronger. It gave better numbers, wider range, lower cost. Cleaner routing, a perfect trap. The voluntary link was weaker and included a release clause. Protected player may withdraw at any time. The tribunal asked the marked volunteers to choose. Some chose the stronger forced link. The system rejected it. Not because they were bad people, but because pressure had made the choice unstable. The release clause was not decorative. It was the proof that protection was still protection. The voluntary link held. The tribunal lowered its chains. Hikari Haru classified as conditional guardian anomaly. Deletion review suspended. The crowd finally cheered. That was when Veil Aren arrived. He waited until the system admitted I was a guardian before showing everyone how guardian could become dangerous. The tribunal also tested public perception. It created 3 false reports and projected them above the plaza. Report 1 showed me as a hidden attacker. Report 2 showed me as a bugged boss exploit. Report 3 showed me as a shelter hazard likely to kill allies. The crowd had to choose which evidence to believe. That was cruel but useful. The system was not only measuring damage. It was measuring whether the shelter could remain stable under fear. A protection field that collapses the moment rumors appear is not a shelter. It is a crowd with better lighting. Amero Rina stepped beside the first report and pointed at the damage lines. Where is his outgoing attack? The report flickered. There was none. Genbu Ryo stood before the second report. If it is a boss exploit, why did the poison test fail? The report flickered again. It could not reconcile the limitation. Toki Mei stood under the third report and marked the reflected paths from the calibration tests. Every returned hit began from a hostile origin. Show one that did not. The report dissolved. The tribunal did not apologize. Systems rarely do. It updated public evidence consistency acceptable. Guardian classification confidence increasing. That extra step mattered because the crowd was part of the shelter's future. They were not just scenery. If they believed every leak, Veil would later break them with one announcement. If they learned how to read the logs, they could survive a smarter enemy. The final audit panel showed the most important distinction. Damage dealt 0, damage caused by direct action 0. Hostile force returned after survival, confirmed. Protection causality confirmed. Unconditional clearance denied. Conditional guardian route accepted. That was the correct ruling. It did not make me legal because I was special. It made me legal because the rules finally had enough evidence to describe what I was doing. Veil Aren stepped out of the first server breach like a commander arriving late to his own victory. Black-silver raid armor. Red vector lines, a mirrored spear in one hand. His tag did not display a normal class. First server commander, mirror burden, the audit tribunal did not attack him. That was the first warning. The second was that my reflection radius recoiled from the spear tip. Veil Aren looked at my tag and smiled without warmth. Veil Aren said the dummy learned to stand upright. Genbu Ryo moved his shield into the outer lane. Toki Mei marked the spear vectors. Amero Rina stayed behind me with purity thread ready. Satoshi Kai, who had returned to watch the audit, quietly closed every contract panel. Even he understood this was not a negotiation scene. Veil Aren raised his spear and struck one of his own black-silver raid dummies. The dummy's attack bounced into my radius. My counter answered automatically. Then the reflected force bent. It did not return to Veil. It curved toward a group of civilians near the fountain. Genbu Ryo barely blocked it in time. His HP dropped hard. The plaza went silent. Veil Aren tapped the spear against his shoulder. Mirror burden, he said. Reflection is just force that forgot who owns it. I remind it where to go. My strongest power had become dangerous. That was a real dark moment. If I reflected carelessly, Veil could redirect the force into bystanders. If I stopped reflecting entirely, his raid force could overrun the plaza. If I chased him, I would be doing exactly what he wanted. Turning the shelter into a weapon near civilians. Veil knew it. He offered me a contract without a contract panel. Stand under my command, he said. I will use you properly. You are always more valuable as terrain than as a person. The old bait script echoed under his words. Amero Rina's purity thread tightened around my wrist. Genbu Ryo growled, say no before I do something stupid. I looked at the people inside the shelter. Some had mocked me, some had tested me. Some had tried to buy me. Some had only survived because the radius existed. Then I looked at Veil. No, he smiled. Then protect them from yourself. The next hour of the story became preparation under pressure. Not training filler, every action answered mirror burden. Genbu Ryo split the plaza into shield lanes so redirected force had walls before civilians. Toki Mei marked unbroken hostile lines in red so we knew where reflections might bend. Amero Rina tied purity thread between consent marks to keep poison from breaking the shelter. Satoshi Kai rewrote shelter prompts so no guild could claim priority under emergency pressure. The release clause stayed visible over every mark. Protected player may withdraw at any time. time. Forced shelter link rejected. I planted dummy stakes in rings. Outer ring, healer ring, civilian ring, anchor ring. Each ring had a purpose. Each purpose had a reason. No one stood there because the story needed hostages. They stood there because the plaza was the only stable node. The city gates were breached, and full soul sink meant scattering alone was worse. Vale watched all of it from the breach. He let us prepare because he believed preparation would make the final failure more public. That was his mistake. He still thought like a commander using tools. He did not understand people who had chosen their places. Vale Eren's first demonstration was small. That made it worse. He did not open with a boss. He did not summon a giant raid monster. He created one black-silver training dummy, struck it with his mirrored spear, and let the dummy's hostile force bounce into my radius. My counter answered automatically because the attack was real. Then Mirror Burden bent the return. The blue-gray force curved away from Vale and shot toward the civilians near the fountain. Genbu Ryo barely crossed the lane in time. His shield caught the reflected force with a sound like a cracked bell. His HP dropped. His boots carved lines into the plaza stone. Nobody cheered. The same power that had saved them almost hurt them. Vale Eren did not need a speech after that, but he gave one because commanders like him enjoy naming traps. Reflection is force with a path, he said. I carry the burden of choosing a better path. Amuro Rina said better for who? He looked at her like she was a healer asking why a sword was sharp. For the clear, that was Vale in one phrase. Not evil laughter, not madness. A worldview where the result justified spending people who did not get to vote. He offered me a place under his command. He made it sound efficient. He said he could prevent civilian deaths. He said he could aim my reflection properly. He said I had already proven I was most valuable when standing still. Every word was aimed at the fear Mirror Burden had just created. If I refused, I looked reckless. If I accepted, I became the old bait class again. So I refused and accepted the harder problem. Protecting people from enemies was easy compared to protecting them from your own power being redirected. The redesign began immediately. Genbu split the plaza into shield lanes, not walls. Walls trap people, lanes guide movement. Toki marked every possible red vector line Mirror Burden could use. She climbed rooftops, fountain edges, and broken stalls, turning the plaza into a geometry lesson no one could afford to fail. Amaro tied purity thread between healer stations so poison could not isolate one support point. Satoshi Kai wrote the shortest shelter rule yet. No emergency transfers of protected player ownership. Viramio watched from a roof and said nothing until Toki missed a wire angle. Then a silver needle cut the hidden line before it could become Vale's route. No one thanked her, she did not ask them to. The crowd learned the release drill. If your mark flashes red, step back. If your HP drops below safe range, release. If a vector line crosses your chest, move to the shield lane. If Vale points at you, do not freeze. Those drills were not filler. They turned frightened players into people who had one action they could take. When the final raid came, Vale watched all of it. He let us prepare because he believed preparation would make the failure larger. That was his second mistake. He thought public choice was noise. It was becoming structure. Vale tested the redesign while we built it. He would send a tiny strike through a raid dummy, watch the reflected path, and adjust Mirror Burden by a few degrees. Each test was weak enough not to start the final fight and strong enough to make everyone flinch. Toki May treated each test like a lesson. She marked the red vector line, shouted the angle, and made the nearby shelter players move before Genbu had to block. When someone moved late, Genbu stepped in. When someone panicked and tried to tear off their mark, Satoshi reminded them that removal was allowed but should be done through the release prompt, not by ripping at the system light. That detail sounded small, it was not. A panicked release could tear the route and hurt the person leaving. A chosen release closed the line cleanly. Vale wanted panic. The release clause turned panic into procedure. Amero Rina built healer knots at 3 distances. Close knot for me, middle knot for shield injuries, outer knot for civilians and low-level players. She did not have enough mana for all 3 at once, so she assigned other healers to the outer knots and kept purity thread on the close line. This gave weaker healers a job that matched their limits instead of pretending everyone could perform at her level. Genbu Ryo trained the shield line to step sideways, not backward. Backward movement crushed civilians. Sideways movement opened lanes. Toki trained archers to shoot markers, not enemies, when Vale's vectors appeared. Satoshi trained guild officers to say the release clause before giving any order involving shelter marks. Even Vira Mio contributed one quiet rule from the rooftop. Never trust a clean, empty path, she said. That is where traps like to be. No one liked that she was right. Vale watched the plaza become harder to manipulate and finally stopped smiling. That was the first sign the preparation was working. The second sign was worse. He raised Mirror Burden and every red vector line vanished. Toki's marks went blind. Vale had hidden the paths. For a moment, the plaza froze. Then the cook from the practice lane threw flour into the air. The fine white powder drifted across the invisible vector lines and bent where force was gathering. Toki saw the bends. Genbu saw Toki's hand. Amero moved the healer knot. The shield lane shifted. The invisible path became visible because a non-combat player remembered she had a bag of flour and a reason to use it. That was the kind of moment the final video needs. Not every save comes from a rare class. Sometimes the system gives someone cook, and a cook sees the air move. The raid breach opened at the town gates. Not one monster, not one army that politely waited for me to be ready. 3 lanes, direct attackers in the main street. Poison casters along the rooftops. Trap carriers under the market boards. Behind them, black-silver first server remnants carried Veil Aren's vector marks, turning every reflected hit into a possible bystander threat. The defenders did not run away to give me more events. They fought because there was nowhere safe behind them. Flame mages burned poison clouds before they reached the healer ring. Swordsmen held the side alleys. Tamers used pets to drag wounded players behind Genbu Ryo's shield line. Healers rotated mana under Amero Rina's direction. Tokime called hostile lines from the rooftops. Satoshi Kai stood at the shelter gate and rejected every contract that tried to turn fear into ownership. I stood in the anchor ring and took only the hits I could survive. That limitation made the battle tense. A giant raid beast charged the main lane. Too strong, fatal if I took it directly. So Genbu Ryo blocked the head angle, Shield Knights slowed the body. Tokime marked a lower force side impact, and I intercepted only the survivable shoulder graze. Perfect target recorded, reflection returned. The beast staggered, not dead but slowed enough for the swordsman to finish without entering my radius. That mattered too. Other players were not useless. They were alive because the shelter gave them room to use their skills. Poison casters tried to flood the healer ring. Amero Rina burned Purity Thread and nearly emptied her mana, but she did not erase the poison for free. She called for water mages to dilute, wind scouts to vent, and shield players to block line of sight. Her skill was powerful because she used it with people, not instead of them. Trap carriers tried to collapse the civilian ring with falling beams. Tokime marked the wire owners. Satoshi Kai identified which traps came from guild equipment stolen earlier. Yuramio, watching from a rooftop, finally acted. She cut 3 hidden wires with silver needles and called down, "Your enemy copies badly." Nobody trusted her. They used the opening anyway. Veil Aren entered when the raid began failing. Mirror burden flared, every reflected force bent toward the healer ring. He was aiming for Amero Rina. Of course he was. A guardian anchor with no healer is just a brave corpse. Genbu Ryo moved to block, but Veil's spear created a second vector toward the civilian ring. Tokime shouted the line too late. The red path split. I had one choice. Reflect nothing and let the raid force hit. Reflect raw and risk civilians, or ground it. I drove the cracked dummy stake into the center of the anchor ring. Release if you cannot hold, I shouted. Some marks vanished. Good. The remaining marks brightened. Genbu Ryo braced the outer shield. Amero Rina tied Purity Thread into the stake. Tokime marked the mirror burden line. Satoshi Kai rejected ownership transfer. The redirected force hit. My HP dropped to 1. The shelter rings turned gold at the edges. System alert, Guardian Anchor II condition met. Hostile force survived through voluntary layered shelter. Mirror burden ownership locked, counter reflection authorized. The force returned not to the civilians, not to Amero Rina, not to me. To Veil Aren's spear, mirror burden cracked. Veil's smile vanished. For the first time, he looked at the training dummy and saw a person he had failed to move. The city raid worked because the enemy used everything it had learned. Direct attackers came first, not because they expected to win, but because direct pressure made the shield lanes commit. The moment Genbu's line locked in place, poison casters appeared on the rooftops. The moment Amero redirected Purity Thread upward, trap carriers moved under the market boards. The moment Toki marked the trap wires, Veil's red vectors started bending reflected force toward the places she was not looking. That was a real raid pattern, pressure. Counter-pressure, exploit the counter. The defenders answered with roles that made sense. Swordsmen did not charge the strongest monsters. They held side alleys so civilians could cross behind them. Flame mages did not spam fire at boss armor. They burned poison clouds before the clouds reached the healer ring. Tamers did not send pets to die. They used quick beasts to drag wounded players by straps and sleeves behind the shield line. Archers did not chase damage numbers. They shot signal arrows at vector marks Toki called out. Healers did not stand in one cluster waiting to be wiped. Amero spread them into rotating stations, each one linked by a thin purity thread that could be cut safely if poison reached it. I stood in the anchor ring and took only hits the formation had made survivable. That was the key. If a monster was too strong, I did not pretend to tank it. Genbu slowed it, mages blinded it, swordsman tripped it. Toki marked a weaker impact angle. Only then did I intercept the part that could be survived and reflected. This gave other players events because they earned them. They were not background decoration. They were the reason my impossible class could function at city scale. The first raid beast fell after 3 reflected impacts and a dozen normal players finishing what the counter opened. The second wave tried poison. Amero's purity thread turned the green mist into white strands. But her mana dropped so fast that 2 other healers had to feed her recovery skills. She was central, not infinite. The third wave used traps. Viera cut 1 hidden ownership drain, missed another. and cursed when a signboard nearly split the civilian lane. Satoshi identified the trap as stolen Iron Crown equipment and rejected the ownership transfer before the system could call it neutral. Then Vale entered. He did not rush. He waited until every lane had a purpose, then aimed mirror burden at the one place no one could ignore. Amero Rina, that was rational. Without the healer ring, my controlled survival became gambling. Without purity thread, poison returned as a hard counter. Without Amero, the shelter would still exist, but it would bleed from every indirect edge. Vale's spear drew a red line through the battlefield. Toki shouted the vector, Genbu moved, Vale split the line. One route to Amero, one route to the civilian ring. I had less than a second to decide. Raw reflection would kill the wrong people. No reflection would let Vale's force land. So I grounded the force through every rule we had built. Consent marks, release clause, shield lane, purity thread. Vector marks, contract rejection, dummy stakes. I drove the central stake into the plaza stone. The hit arrived, every ring lit at once. My HP dropped to 1, the shelter did not break. It changed, the raid's second phase targeted morale. Vale Eren understood formations. He knew the fastest way to break a shelter was not always to break its walls. Sometimes it was to make people believe the walls were causing the danger. A black-silver remnant threw a spear at my radius and let the reflection bend toward a side lane. Genbu blocked it, but 3 civilians saw the blue-gray force pass near them and screamed. The scream spread faster than the damage. Vale's voice crossed the battlefield. Your guardian is a loaded weapon. Some players stepped back from their marks. That was allowed. The release clause worked. The shelter weakened but did not corrupt. Aozora Kaito was not awake yet, but the idea that would define him was already alive. Anyone could leave. The people who stepped back created gaps, and those gaps had to be managed. The defenders shifted. Shield knights moved inward. Mages covered the exposed lane. Tamers carried the retreating civilians behind safer stonework. This made the battle feel worse and better at the same time. Worse because losing marks hurt. Better because no one had to be trapped for the formation to keep existing. Satoshi Kai noticed Iron Crown players hesitating near the contract gate. He made his choice. He opened a public seal and canceled every emergency priority claim his guild had tried to reserve. Iron Crown players stared at him. Satoshi said, if we survive because we bought the front of the line, we have already lost the argument. That did not redeem him completely. It did give his guild a reason to fight without pretending they own the shelter. Vira Mio's contribution came when poison casters tried to use the retreating mark gaps as lanes. She dropped gray smoke flowers on the rooftops, not on our players but on the caster's sight lines. The flowers did not poison. They revealed movement through the haze. Toki used the outlines to mark the real attackers. Amero Rina's healer ring held because other healers started copying her timing. Small pulses, no overhealing, clean purge priority. Mana calls out loud. The audience needs to see that by the final act. Hikari's power has not made the cast irrelevant. It has taught them a language, hit lines, owner lines, release lines, heal lines, shield lanes. The final raid is the exam where everyone uses that language under Vale's pressure. The raid's third phase targeted exhaustion. That was the part most highlight edits skip, but it is where long-form tension lives. Amero's hands started shaking from repeated purity thread use. Genbu's shield arm dropped a few centimeters between impacts. Toki's voice went rough from calling vectors. The cook ran out of flour. The tamer's beast slowed down. Even the players who had released their shelter marks and stepped back had to carry water, move wounded allies, and clear broken gear from the lanes. Vale understood stamina. He sent no giant attack for several minutes. Only small hits, a spear here, a poison puff there. A trap wire under a retreat path. A command vector that forced one shield to shift. Each one was solvable, that was the point. Solvable problems still drain people when they come without rest. I could not fix exhaustion by reflecting harder. So we changed the rhythm. Satoshi called out rest rotations like contract clauses. Genbu assigned shield pairs instead of solo blocks. Amero gave other healers permission to let minor wounds wait if the HP bar was stable. Toki stopped marking every threat and marked only the ones that affected the anchor route. That was character growth in action. Early in the story, everyone tried to solve every problem immediately because death felt one mistake away. By the raid, the team had learned triage. They chose which threats mattered now, which could wait, and which were bait meant to waste attention. That made Vale angry, not visibly at first. His face stayed calm, but his vector lines sharpened and his next strike came faster. He had wanted panic, he got prioritization. That was another kind of victory before the final blow. Vale Eren did not accept defeat. Commanders like him never do. They call failure a formation problem and look for another body to spend. He broke the remains of Mirror Burden and drove the spear into the ground. Every black-silver remnant in the raid lanes raised their weapons. Not to attack me, to attack each other with force that Mirror Burden could redirect through the shelter. It was ugly and clever. If I reflected enemy attacks, Vale could claim the force came from his own troops. If I refused, his troops would cut down the defenders. If the defenders struck back too hard, the redirected lines might splash into the civilian ring. The final problem was not strength, it was ownership. Tokime marked every red vector she could see. Satoshi Kai shouted, if they attack under Vale's order, the command owns the line. Aozora Kaito was not awake yet in this version of the story, but Genbu Ryo understood the formation principle without needing him. Genbu Ryo shouted, then make them choose. The defenders did not kill the remnants. They broke formation signals, shield knights blocked command flags, scouts cut vector marks, mages blinded spear relays, tamers dragged wounded enemies out of the command ring. A few remnants dropped their weapons and ran. Their lines vanished. The ones who kept attacking remained tied to Vale. The ownership path narrowed. Vale realized it too late. He launched the final strike himself. A black-silver spear line aimed at Amero Rina's heart. I stepped into it. Amero Rina shouted my name. The spear force hit the anchor ring. My HP stayed at 1 because there was no lower number the system could show without ending the story. The hidden log opened. Hostile commander strike survived. Owner Vale Eren. Mirror burden fracture confirmed. Guardian anchor II active. Counter reflection authorized. The blue-gray and gold radius expanded across the plaza. Every dummy stake lit. Every consent mark answered. Every player who had chosen shelter became part of the grounding route. The force returned to Vale. He tried to redirect it. There was nowhere left to send it. The release clause rejected civilians. The shield lane rejected splash damage. Purity thread rejected poison contamination. Toki Maze marks rejected false lines. Satoshi Kai's contract seal rejected ownership transfer. Genbu Ryo's shield rejected the easy path. The force returned to the attacker who owned it. Vale Eren shattered under his own command strike. No gore, no scream that needed lingering. Just black-silver armor cracking into red vector light, then collapsing into harmless fragments. The final system log opened. Vale Eren defeated. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. Damage contribution 0. Weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Guardian anchor II registered. Anchor node 1 established. For a long time, nobody spoke. Then the gray training dummy tag above my head changed. It did not become a sword. It did not become a crown. It remained a dummy icon, but the dull gray would gain a gold edge. The crowd saw it. Nobody laughed. Amero Rina leaned into my shoulder, exhausted and furious. You are still at 1 HP, she said. I know. Genbu Ryo lifted his cracked shield. Let her have that one. Tokime looked toward the EDRC window. Director Shizuka's operations room was silent, not calm. Silent. Behind her, old capsule records opened one after another. First server accounts, status deceased, neural lock breaking. Discarded role waking. Names appeared that none of us knew yet. Yunakai Aozora Kaito Renkakai Setsuname. Yato Kira. The next story had already started breathing. But this one had ended properly. The game gave me 0 damage. It forgot that every hostile hit had to belong to someone. And after enough survived hits, even a training dummy could become the safest place in the world to stand. Guardian Anchor II did not feel like power at first. It felt like too many hands on one rope. Every consent mark pulled through me, every shield brace, every healer thread, every scout line, every contract rejection. Every player who chose to stay and every player who chose to step back. The system was not giving me a bigger attack. It was admitting that the shelter had become a route. Vale Eren understood the danger before the crowd did. That was why he broke mirror burden and tried the command line attack. If he could make his own troops strike each other under his order, the force would become messy. If the force became messy, he could redirect it through the confusion. If we reflected without sorting ownership, civilians would suffer and the Guardian would become the threat. Satoshi Kai solved the first half. He shouted from the shelter gate, command ownership. If they attack because Vale orders it, the line returns to Vale unless they choose out. That gave the remnants a chance. Some dropped their weapons. Their red lines vanished. Some kept attacking. Their red lines stayed tied to Vale. Aozora Kaito had not entered the story yet, but the principle was already there. A formation built on choice can separate people from commands. Toki marked the remaining lines. Genbu and the Shield Knights blocked splash routes. Amero kept my HP from blinking below 1 with threads so bright they looked white. Vieira cut 2 hidden vector wires and vanished again before anyone could decide whether to forgive her. The final spear line aimed at Amero because Vale still thought removing support removed the person. I stepped into the line. That was not self-sacrifice in the old sense. I was not accepting a cage. I was standing where the route had chosen to put its anchor, with every release clause still open behind me. The spear force hit. For one instant, the system tried to resolve it as reflected force, redirected force, command force, shelter force, and hostile force all at once. The layered rings answered one by one. Civilian ring rejected ownership. Shield lane rejected splash damage. Purity thread rejected poison contamination. Scout marks rejected false vectors. Contract seals rejected transfer clauses. Dummy stakes grounded the line. The only owner left was the commander who launched it. Vale Eren, counter-reflection returned the force to its source. Mirror burden could not carry it away because every other route refused to receive it. Vale shattered under his own command strike, and the plaza filled with black-silver light that dissolved before it touched the crowd. The log opened. Vale Eren defeated. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru 0. Damage contribution 0. Weapon slot locked. Active attack skills locked. Guardian Anchor II registered. Anchor node 1 established. The crowd read every line. the same 0 that had made them laugh in the opening now. Made the victory impossible to dismiss. I had not become a swordsman. I had not secretly unlocked a weapon. I had not cast a hidden attack spell. I had stood where hostile force had to name itself. That was enough. Director Shizuka's EDRC window opened behind the final log. Her room should have been celebrating. Instead, old capsule records were waking across her monitors. Deceased first server accounts, neural lock breaking. Discarded roles waking. Names appeared like sparks at the edge of a larger fire. Yunakai Aozora Kaito Renkakai Setsuname. Yato Kira, I did not know those names yet. But the system did, and after everything that had happened, I knew one more rule. If the system had buried them, someone had wanted them forgot. Part 1 ended with the city alive, Vale defeated, my damage still 0, and the next erased players beginning to wake. That was not a missing ending. It was the next door opening after the first promise had been paid. After Vale shattered, the first server remnants did not all disappear. Some did, the ones bound fully to mirror burden dissolved with the spear. Others dropped to their knees, black-silver marks flickering over their armor. They were enemies a moment ago. They had carried hostile lines. They had helped open the raid breach. The crowd wanted them gone. That was understandable. A swordsman shouted, "Do not let them stand inside the shelter." Genbu raised his shield, not toward the remnants but toward the crowd. Wait, that one word stopped a revenge scene from becoming a mistake. Toki marked the remnants one by one. Some still had red hostile lines. Those were restrained by shield knights. Some had gray command scars but no active hostility. Those were watched. None were allowed near the civilian ring. Amero checked one remnant's HP and found it dropping from command backlash. She looked at me. I knew what she was asking. Could the shelter protect someone who had just been an enemy? The release clause did not say only friends could choose. It said protected player may withdraw. It said no ownership transfer. It said voluntary. One remnant removed his helmet. He looked terrified, younger than the armor made him seem. The remnant said, "I thought the commander line was the only thing keeping us alive." Satoshi Kai stepped forward with a blank consent panel. No guild priority, no immunity, no erased consequences. Shelter only. The remnant touched it. The mark appeared weak blue-gray. Not bright, not trusted, but valid. That decision did not forgive him. It kept him alive long enough for truth to matter. Director Shizuka recorded the moment from the EDRC. That would matter in part 2 when the world had to decide whether discarded and enemy-marked accounts could be restored instead of simply deleted. The final public perception shift happened there. Not when Vale broke. When the shelter protected someone the crowd had reason to hate. Without pretending the harm was gone. The training dummy had become the safest place to stand. Not the easiest place, not the purest place. The safest place where rules still mattered. Only after that did the gray gold tag settle above my head. Training dummy Guardian Anchor II, Anchor Node 1. The dummy icon remained. I was glad. If the system had replaced it with a sword or a crown, the whole point would have been lost. I did not win by becoming a better attacker. I won by making the role nobody wanted impossible to use as a cage again. The last thing I saw before the sequel records opened was the first dummy stake. The same rough wooden post from the practice lane stood in the plaza center, cracked, scorched and wrapped in blue-gray light. It had started as a measurement tool. It had become a shelter anchor. It ended part 1 as proof that the smallest visible radius can become a place people choose. That image should be the final emotional hold before the EDRC sequel seed. Then the monitors opened. Then the new names appeared. Then part 1 could end. The final log stayed open longer than normal. Maybe the system needed time to classify the result. Maybe the audit tribunal was still watching through its suspended review. Maybe Edenfall itself had never expected a commander-class enemy to lose to a player whose offensive panel still read empty. Whatever the reason, the pause helped. Everyone in the plaza had time to read the impossible proof. Damage dealt by Hikari Haru, 0 not low. Not hidden, 0, the word that made me disposable in the first minute had become the signature at the end of the fight.